Don't talk about a government agency taking care of these things. Don't talk about some institutional program that will look after the homeless and the hungry and so on. No, you do it. You do it. There are hungry people right near you. Well, feed them.
Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vaught, the host and the senior publishing director at Word on Fire. Almost all of us want to be a good person, but how do we actually do that? How do we become a person of love? That's what we're discussing today with Bishop Robert Barron, joining us from Rochester, Minnesota. Bishop, good to see you.
Hey, Brandon, how you doing today?
Pretty good. I hear there's some exciting developments and updates with the new pastoral center that you're building there in Rochester. Tell us about that.
Yeah, as we record these words, I'm not sure when the show will come out, but as we record them, I just got back from a meeting at the new pastoral center. It's about, 6 or 7 minutes from where we're recording these words. It's in Rochester here. And we're moving, the headquarters of the diocese from Winona to Rochester. And through a wonderful donation from a great Catholic here and other donors, we got property and we're building a lovely pastoral center. And I brought in an architect friend of mine, Matt Nicholas from Chicago, who was trained at Notre Dame in classical Catholic architecture. And he sort of enhanced the building to make it more Catholic in appearance. In the center of it, it's got two wings. In the center, though, is a great chapel, and with a rose window and a vaulted ceiling. And it's not finished yet, but we got in today, and I really saw the height of it. And even now, it has a great majesty and beauty about it. So I'm just thrilled. It'll be a huge upgrade for us in the diocese to move from where we had been in Winona to here. And I think it'll be an evangelically important sign to the community, because as you come along, it's a major street. As you come along, you see this beautiful, the back of the chapel with the rose window. From the other direction, you see the facade of the building. And so I think it'll proclaim the gospel in its own way. So very happy about it.
When do you expect it to be move-in ready?
Well, they say April 30th. So what, about 4 or 5 months from now? And we broke ground in late April. So they build that building pretty fast. So I'm just delighted by that.
Well, today I want to talk with you about how to become a person of love. When you ask people on the street, what's the purpose of life? Religious people, non-religious people, probably the most common answer you'll get is to be a good person. Mm-hmm. And you and I have quibbled with that answer. That's not necessarily the full purpose of life, but it does raise the question, how do you do that? How do you become a good person? What does it mean? Now, in answer to that, you've often quoted Dorothy Day, who once said that everything a baptized Christian does every day should be related to the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, when you were rector of Mundelein Seminary, you had posters made with that quote, and you hung them up all around the campus. What is Dorothy getting at here, and why are these corporal and spiritual works of mercy so important?
It's one of those quotes that was just illuminating from the moment I read it. Certain things you read, and it just kind of takes your breath away, and you say, yes, that just sheds light in every direction. I think the reason, Brandon, is it so concretizes what we mean when we say love. So, right, everyone wants to be a good person, and everyone's devoted to love. Great. But what does that mean? It means to will the good of the other. And you say, okay, I get that, but that's still kind of abstract. What does it mean to will the good of the other? And her answer was, it means the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, these works of love, right? An outreach in love to those who are suffering in some way. Now we're talking concretely about the Christian life. I like how Pope Francis likes that word concrete, to make something real. Because we religious people, especially, we can sometimes lose ourselves in gassy abstractions. Okay, so I'm a person of love. Well, that looks like something. It looks like these very particular acts. And so it's a great way of anchoring your spiritual life and your moral life.
I just realized maybe there's probably some people listening who aren't familiar with corporal and spiritual works of mercy. So maybe we could back up one step and just give us a basic overview of what these are. We're going to walk through each of them one at a time, but what are these in general?
Well, we should just probably name them, right? To feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, to provide shelter for the homeless, to visit the sick, to bury the dead. I'm always missing one.
Visit the imprisoned.
Visit the imprisoned. So they're very concrete, aren't they? They're very particular. No, don't talk about a government agency taking care of these things. Don't talk about some institutional program that will look after the homeless and the hungry and so on. No, you do it. You do it. There are hungry people right near you. Well, feed them, So it anchors the moral life in a way that is both unnerving and liberating.
So you listed out the 7 corporal works of mercy. There's also 7 spiritual works of mercy. I thought maybe we could devote a discussion to that in a couple weeks or so.
Okay.
I want to focus on the corporal works of mercy today. Would you say it's correct that we, as people aiming to be people of love, should use these as a litmus test, that
Yes.
these are the marks we should measure our love against?
Yes, because if you say, all right, to love me is to will the good of the other and do something about it. All right. Now, show me. Show me precisely how you're doing that. And it's got to show up in your life as these works of mercy to those who are in need. So yes, I think it's a very good way to ground the Christian life.
All right, so let's go through them one at a time. I thought, if nothing else, this might be a good opportunity for all of us to use as an examination of conscience as we're discussing these.
Yes.
To think through.
Yes.
Am I following these myself?
Yeah.
Maybe we can group the first few together. So the first 3 are feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked. How do you read these 3?
Very basic needs of people that have to be met. Again, we can fly into the realm of abstraction. Oh, I'm helping people. Well, how? There are people who are in need in this most basic way. Now you say, oh, I guess, overseas, so I'll send some money to the missions. Well, fine. I have nothing against that. Please do it. And that is a way of doing the works of mercy. But we can forget, Brandon, very easily. I don't care who's listening to me right now. Trust me, within 10 minutes of where you're sitting, there are hungry and thirsty people. There are. I lived for 6 years, as you well know, in Santa Barbara, California, one of the most, exclusive parts of the world. Oprah lives there in Montecito. Prince Harry lives there. Kevin Costner, movie stars live there. I lived, 15 minutes from where they live. I didn't live in a fancy schmancy neighborhood, but Santa Barbara. But 10 minutes from my house in Santa Barbara, maybe less than that, there were people who were hungry and thirsty and on a chronic basis. So don't think that the hungry and thirsty and those who need decent clothing are just in some distant, Asian or African country. They are, no matter where you're hearing me, they are within 10 minutes of you. So what are you doing to help them? Now, homeless shelters and soup kitchens, and great. Believe me, there's one not far from you. I don't care where you are. There's one not far from you. Go, help out. Give money to it. Yes, indeed. Be a presence at a place like that. Yes, vote in accord with some of these principles. Sure, do all those things. But I like the direct involvement, that you personally kind of getting your hands dirty, so to speak. You get involved in these activities. But, think of something, Brandon, as simple as a mom preparing a meal for her kids. Well, that's a corporal work of mercy. She's feeding the hungry, Think of someone who's getting a lemonade for someone who's thirsty after a run or something. Sure, that's giving drink to the thirsty. So it's not like just the dramatic cases of, those who are in dire need, but even those simple gestures of assuaging someone's hunger or thirst. Clothe the naked. There are people who are in need of warm clothing. A lot of people listen to me right now. Within 10 minutes of you, there are centers that provide clothes for people that need them. Babies who are, in poor families that need basic clothing. One thing I mentioned, I think maybe at the Good News Conference, I said the closet is a very interesting place for some spiritual work. What I meant was, you go into your closet and trust me, you're going to find all kinds of things in there that you don't wear, that you haven't worn in ages. There's a shirt. Why is that still here? I haven't worn a thing in 3 years. Well, that's a very good sign that it's time to give that away. Someone once said to me, there should be like an expiration date on clothes, like on food. Like if this shirt expired in 2019. Good. Go into your closet and find shoes and shirts and pants and coats that you can and should give away and give. That's clothing the naked, right? So I like the particular concrete quality of these things.
You shared that Dorothy Day quote just kind of rocked your world and left an indelible mark. There was a similar quote that I encountered when I was in college. At the time, I was a Protestant, and there was an evangelical writer named Shane Claiborne, kind of an evangelical version of Dorothy Day, wrote a book called The Irresistible Revolution about serving the poor. And he said this, he said, I come to see that the great tragedy in the church is not that rich Christians do not care about the poor, but that rich Christians do not know the poor. And his point was that there's an indirect way to help the poor through charities and organizations and donations. And all those are good things. We should encourage them. There's something radically different when you go into the street and physically give food or drink to somebody, or physically give clothes to somebody. Why is that a different type of interaction?
Because it reaches to the fullness of your being. It's not just the velleity, that would be the most abstract, nor is it just sending a check. It's something that involves the totality of you. As I say, it gets your hands dirty. Or Pope Francis, it gives you the smell of the sheep, So I think it's an incarnational understanding of these works. The closet thing again is interesting. I think I got that idea from, it's been attributed to both John Chrysostom and to St. Ambrose, the line that if you've got two shirts in your closet, one belongs to you, the other belongs to the man who has no shirt. Talk about a quote that takes your breath away, right? If you let that one sink in, I don't know. I mean, look at all the shirts I got in my closet, many of which I don't wear anymore.
And you kind of wear the same thing every day.
Yeah, that's right. I wear a lot of the same look every day, basic black. So there's such a good, challenging, and incarnate way of expressing love.
So those are the first three of the corporal works of mercy: feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, clothing the naked. The fourth one is visiting the imprisoned. Is this one we should take literally, that all Christians should be going to prisons and visiting prisoners? Yes.
I've many times quoted Johnny Cash, one of my musical heroes, but who played in prisons all the time. Famously, the Folsom prison and all that. And he was asked why he did that, and his answer was, well, because I'm a Christian, which is a perfectly satisfactory answer to that question, I think. So yes, indeed, it does mean that. But, he broadened it to, there are a lot of prisons, aren't there? Elderly people that are kind of imprisoned in their own home. Sick people that can be imprisoned on their own bed. People imprisoned by addictions. People imprisoned by their fears. Imprisoned by old hatreds they can't get rid of. There's a lot of forms of incarceration. And so do we visit, in a liberating way, those who are in prison? Maybe think about that when you, again, I like your idea, Brandon, of a way of examining your conscience. I find that very helpful when you go to confession, so that you don't just kind of repeat the same formulas over and over again, but you really examine your conscience. One way to do it is with the deadly sins or with the Ten Commandments, but this is not a bad way either. How have I done or not done the corporal and spiritual works? So as you're approaching your day, all right, who are imprisoned people that I'm likely to meet today, or that I should go to meet today and visit? It's a good question.
I think there's a lot of us at Word on Fire whom you've counseled and helped over the years. And I know one bit of advice you often give to somebody who's really struggling in a dark period, whether because of depression or doubt or sin, or they're just going through something tough, And a bit of advice you regularly give is go out and do an
Yes.
act of love.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
use these as your reference. Why
Yeah.
is that the right path to take?
I've been saying that for years because I preach that to myself too. Look, if the Lord is right about this, that you'll know that you're my disciples by your love. God is love. The goal of life is union with God, and therefore we have our answer. That's the answer. And I think it's proven experientially over and over again that when you're preoccupied, when you're afraid, you're anxious, you're depressed, there's a kind of, as Augustine said, right, incurvatus in se, you've caved in around yourself. Go out. Go out. And not just to find entertainment, go out in an attitude of love. And you'll break free of this kind of black hole quality. That's, I think, our metaphor for incurvatus in se would be a black hole that just draws everything into itself. To break free from that is to engage even in the simplest act of love. It doesn't have to be, Mother Teresa, but I mean, just how about write a note to someone that you haven't talked to for a while that you suspect probably could use a word of encouragement. Offer a compliment to someone who needs it, right? Help a kid who's struggling with his or her studies in school. Bake cookies and give them out. I mean, do anything that will break you free of the black hole tendency of sin. That's what I mean. And so when people write to me, they do sometimes, saying just that, like, I'm just lost. I'm in a black depression, And I don't know the person well enough to be giving like really good psychological or counseling kind of advice. But I always say that. All right, step one, perform the simplest act of love today. And then tomorrow, do another one. And the next day, maybe do 2 acts of love, And it can't do any harm. The person probably needs, I know needs more, personal attention and maybe psychological counseling and medication even, who knows? And nothing wrong with any of that. But as step one, perform the simplest act of love. And I think you'll find a way out of that hell.
Well, the 5th corporal work of mercy is shelter the homeless. And it's easy to think of Dorothy Day once again. She and Peter Morin founded these houses of hospitality where they would regularly welcome people off the street to sleep as long as they needed to. What does that mean for the rest of us who maybe aren't in a position to, literally welcome homeless people into our homes? Or is that what the church is driving at here?
Well, at the limit, I think. But look, everyone knows in our country it's worsened enormously in the course of my lifetime, the homelessness problem. My years in L.A., I was there for 6 years, and it was appreciably worse. When I arrived in L.A., and even in Santa Barbara, when I arrived there, and then 6 years later, it was appreciably worse. Go up the coast in California, San Francisco, and other places. Homelessness here in Rochester, Minnesota, which is brutal as the winter has now arrived, So yeah, to be aware of that problem and do something. Now that might be, in your contributions, in your political commitments, but yeah, that you do something to provide shelter. Now, maybe it's working in a homeless shelter. Maybe it's contributing to a homeless shelter. So different ways you could do it. But that problem has only gotten worse, hasn't it, in our time?
All right, let's move to the 6th corporal work of mercy, which is visiting the sick. How should we understand that?
Something everyone can do, from oldest to youngest, it seems to me. We all know someone who's sick. In the hospital, in a hospice care, in nursing care, someone who just has a bad case of the flu and they're in bed. Everyone, I bet, listen to me right now, knows somebody who's sick and could stand a visit. When I was doing parish work, Brandon, many years ago, I was very devoted to this. And not that I found it easy, I didn't. The prospect of getting in the car and driving to a hospital and spending a couple of hours, visiting parishioners. But gosh, I always, without exception, came back from those visits full of joy. I always thought of the psalm. They went out full of tears, carrying seed for the sowing. They come back full of songs, carrying their sheaves. That's what it was like for me when I was go to the hospital to visit parishioners. is I kind of went out with tears, like with some resistance, but I always came back laughing. Always came back with a song. Right? Do it. Do it. Visit people who are sick. We all know somebody. So it's, again, concrete. Hard to do? Yeah, sometimes. Annoying, difficult? Yeah, but do it. Visit the sick.
I like how this corporal work of mercy is not heal the sick,
Right.
not make them feel better, but visit
Visit
them.
them.
Why? What about visiting is important?
This is an act of love, isn't it? It's being with someone. It's willing the good of the other. As I've come just to be with you. And I remember this is some years ago when I was really sick. I won't go into all the details, but I just come out of a surgery, and I must say I didn't want visitors at that point. I was like, please go away. But then after a few days, no, I craved having visitors. Because we all know it's a tough time, and it's hard to be yourself when you're sick, and so visiting means a lot.
All right, let's turn to the last corporal work of mercy, which is burying the dead. And I know you have a particular memory of your father in regards to this corporal work of mercy, how he practiced it and counted it.
It's where I learned the term. 'Cause this one, I was a little kid, and my father, was a good Irishman. He went to a lot of wakes, and he was a salesman. He knew a lot of people, and that combination meant he went to a lot of wakes. And he'd come home from the wake, and I'm a little kid, and we're kind of wondering, what were you doing? What's the point of that? And he would always say, corporal work of mercy. So he must have learned that when he was a kid in Catholic, grade school. So going back into the 1920s. And what do you mean, corporal work of mercy? And you say, well, that's one of them is burying the dead. Is that you're attentive to the needs of, those the families of those who've died, et cetera. And so that's where the phrase first got in my mind. And biblically it goes back to Tobit, doesn't it? In the book of Tobit, who buries the dead, who were left lying on the ground and not attended to. And so it was a work of mercy for them and for their families. And so, again, when I was a parish priest, I spent a lot of time burying the dead. I spent a lot of time in funeral parlors, going to wakes, and then presiding at funerals, and then driving behind hearses to cemeteries and doing graveside services. I spent a lot of time burying the dead. I would tell my guys at Mundelein when I was rector, as a priest, you're going to do the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And one of them is that. You'll be 26 or 7 years old. It's a beautiful summer day, and you're following the third hearse of the week, But that's the game. That's what we do. We do the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. So that's, again, a concrete expression of the church's life.
As we wrap up here, I wanted to ask one more question about these corporal works in relation to families. Bouncing off something you said just a little bit earlier is, I talk to a lot of mothers and fathers with lots of kids, and they already feel overwhelmed thinking of adding all these extra corporal works of mercy to what they're doing. But I know for me, there was once a priest who impressed upon me the need to practice these within the family, and how parents are naturally already doing at least six of these things every day.
Feed the hungry. Think of all the times, Brandon, you and Kathleen have fed your children and give them a drink when they're...
Most days.
Well, yeah, a few days you just leave them to starve. No, so right, and clothe the naked. Well, look, how many babies have you brought home, naked from the hospital? And from that moment on, you've been clothing them. So yes, that's absolutely right. And even, visit the imprisoned, not that your kids are in prison, but they'll get imprisoned by all kinds of, their fears or their anxieties or whatever. Visit the sick? Are you kidding? Parents are always at the bedside of sick kids, right? So yeah, that's absolutely right. It doesn't have to be, the dramatic Dorothy Day, Mother Teresa expression, but it can be very everyday. Absolutely.
Well, it's time now for our question from one of our listeners. Today we have one about sin, the passing on of sin. Here's the question.
Hi, Bishop Barron. My name is Gigi, and I'm wondering, since I did not inherit the sins of my parents, why did I inherit the sins of Adam and Eve? Thank you for taking my question. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. But see, I would quarrel with your major premise, because I think willy-nilly, you have inherited your parents' sin. I don't mean that your parents' sin is applied to your own will, like you're responsible for their bad choices. But sin is like a contagion. It's like a dysfunction in a family. So think of a kid born into a dysfunctional family where alcohol abuse or drug abuse or physical abuse or whatever is on offer. Whether that kid likes it or not, he inherits, in that sense, the sins of his parents. The most dramatic example would be a crack baby, right? There's a baby that's born to a mother who's addicted to crack. The baby is born addicted to crack, even though the baby's not morally responsible in any way. But de facto, the baby has inherited the sin of his mother. Well, I think sin is kind of like that. It's a poisonous atmosphere that we're in. And I think about my own dear parents, sure, the quirks or limitations of theirs that I inherited or that I was affected by. And I think that's the best way to understand original sin, that we do indeed inherit now this whole long history of human dysfunction, beginning with our first parents, but coming up through the whole of human history. Sure, we inherit that. It affects us. Again, not to be assigned to my personal will, but that's what the church teaches. Original sin is not assigned to my personal will, but it's like a poisonous atmosphere. See, again, that's why we need not just a teacher, we need a savior. We need someone that can come into the dysfunction, but is not of the dysfunction. See, if Jesus is just one more human being, well, they're as affected as I am. They might be smart and interesting, and they might offer some political liberation or whatever, but they won't save us. The Savior has to come from outside the dysfunction and enter into it. We say he's fully human and fully divine, because only such a figure can really save us. He's only human, well, then he's stuck in it with us. He's only divine, well, then he's hovering above the mess. But he's divine and human, now he can function as a savior. And that's why we need him to save us from sin and all of its manifestations.
Well, thanks for that question. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this discussion on the corporal works of mercy. Again, probably in a couple weeks here, we'll have a follow-up discussion and we'll walk through the spiritual works of mercy. So look forward to that one. Listen, as we wrap up here, Lent is right around the corner. When this episode drops, it's only going to be about a month away. Lent actually is going to be on February 14th this year. It's on Valentine's Day. Yeah. So good luck to a lot of couples trying to figure that night out. But at Word on Fire, we are once again releasing our Lent Reflections booklet. So you can get your 2024 Lent Reflections booklet today, and we want to send it to you for free. You can get a free copy. You just cover the shipping and handling. You can also order bulk copies, 20, 50, 100, or even for your whole parish. I know tons of parishes do that. Each booklet features the gospel reading for every day during Lent from Mass, along with a short reflection from Bishop Barron. So you can journey through the scriptures throughout Lent. Hundreds of thousands of people have been enjoying these books over many years. So learn more, get your free single copy, and then order a bunch more to pass out to friends or family or parishioners. You can find out more at the website wordonfire.org/Lent2024. The website's wordonfire.org/Lent2024. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Well, thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on the Word on Fire show.